In high school, my family moved to a new town between my junior and senior years. I was happy we had moved. I wasn't very popular at my old school. I was that super awkward kid that was picked on. I wasn't athletic or handsome, but pretty clever, especially in physics. So when I arrived at my new school, I made some friends. I wasn't in the inner circle or anything, but they allowed me to study with them. Just one girl always asked me to sit near her. She had long blonde hair, a beautiful smile, and that cheerleader energy. She was very friendly towards me, not like a boyfriend or girlfriend. She had a boyfriend who was the senior football player on the school team. His name was Eddie. Eddie was one of the guys who allowed me to study with the group, so he was all right, and I was proud that I had a friend who was the star player, even if it was only for the study group. Things were going really well for me 2 months into my senior year. Chelsea had become close, and we studied outside the group for chemistry class after school while the rest of the gang had football practice. We were having the best time. The second Saturday of November was scheduled for the championship game in the end of the football season. Our team was favored to win. The whole school was thrilled. Eddie called me after school on Friday before the championship. He said the gang had a tradition before the last game of the season to go to an abandoned hunting camp deep in the woods. He said no one knew where it was, but our gang and he would like for me to come. They had a ritual to get pumped and energized. It was the inner circle, and I was invited. Eddie said to meet the gang at dusk behind the football field, where there is an abandoned path. Bring a flashlight. It will be dark, and there is no moon tonight. I ran home and grabbed my dad's big mag light buried in the back of his truck and raced to the football field where Eddie was waiting. I asked, "Where are the other guys?" Eddie said, "It was getting dark, so they went ahead. We'll meet them at the abandoned cabin. It's about a mile from here on the back side of the moose pond, so stay close. I know the way." The forest was dense, and as soon as we entered, daylight disappeared, and we turned on our flashlights. I followed Eddie closely, and in the beam of my light, I could see Eddie had a Bowie knife strapped to his belt. "Hey Eddie, why do we need a hunting knife?" He responded, "Don't worry about it." We walked, pushing through the branches and underbrush for about an hour. We stopped to rest near a swamp of dead trees. It was very eerie. I said, "Eddie, when will we get there?" He swung around, brandishing the Bowie knife, snarling, "We are there." He swiped the Bowie in an attempt to slice my neck. The blade cut through my Carhartt jacket, but only scratched my chest with a long red crease above my heart as I stepped backward. He charged again, screaming like a banshee. I deflected the blade with my maglite. The knife fell from his hand. He dove for it, and I brought the maglite down hard to the back of his head. He dropped, dazed by my defense. I kicked his flashlight from his other hand and grabbed it, hurling it into the swamp water. It disappeared and went out. I shone my light onto Eddie, who scrambled for the knife. I turned and ran into the dark forest. I turned my light out and stood silent. 50 yards back, I could hear Eddie screaming like a wild animal, "I'm going to kill you! Stay away from my girl! I'll teach you to not steal my girl!" With my flashlight, I could find the old trail and make the hour walk back to the football field. I went home, replaced my father's maglite in his truck, and hung my coat in my bedroom closet, never to wear it again. Saturday night, I went to the football championship with Chelsea. Our team lost. Eddie never showed up for the game, and without him, the team struggled. The question as to where Eddie was on everybody's mind. I said nothing. The school year passed, and Chelsea and I graduated. Eddie was never found. Without his flashlight, he got turned around, stumbled, and was swallowed up by the swamp he intended to sink me in. My name is Robert, but everyone still calls me Bobby. I live in Snowshoe. It's a real place off Interstate 80. It was a mining center a century ago, but not much goes on in Snowshoe today. Me and most of my friends hunt for sport, and we eat the meat whatever we shoot. It's a way of life in this part of Pennsylvania. Well, anyway, I was out hunting deer and tracking a pretty big buck when I discovered an old abandoned mine entrance. There are a lot of abandoned mines in this region, but most of them are sealed shut. This one was well hidden, with no trail leading to it. It was very remote. I've only been in this area a couple of times, even when I was a kid hunting with my dad. It was ancient, and the entrance was supported with hand-hewn timbers. I peered in, but was a little afraid to explore on my own. No sign of coal around, so I'm guessing it was gold they were after. When I got home, I called my buddy Pete, who was always ready for an adventure. An abandoned mine would be right up his tailpipe. He was, as expected, excited to explore an old abandoned mine. We have crawled into some pretty tight caves over the years, so a dark mine wasn't intimidating. It would make a great story at our high school on Monday at the very least. On Saturday morning, we packed our flashlights, climbing helmets with light attachments, a rock pick in the hope of seeing a gold vein or gemstone in the rock, and a length of rope, just in case. Pete asked how far up the mountain it was, and I guessed it was about a mile from my house. No path, we would have to break our own. It took us a good 40 minutes to reach the mine. I had left a few game trail tree ties, making locating it easy. The tunnel was slanted downward at about a 10-degree angle and just tall enough for us to walk with our heads bent. The area around the entrance was grown over. Even the slag pile was green with fern and saplings. No evidence of anyone having been here in many, many years. We geared up and entered apprehensively, as the timbers were so old and rotted that we feared that they could come crashing down if we pushed on them. The first 100 feet were straight, with just a few debris piles. Mostly, it was dry, other than a few damp spots where water was seeping in through fissures in the rock. We only spoke in whispers, if at all. I was leading, and Pete was a yard behind with the rope, just in case there was a shaft we didn't see. At about 100 feet from the entrance, the tunnel turned to the right and leveled out. We followed that for about 50 more feet when it enlarged into a 10 by 12 foot room. We were shocked to see a rough-hewn table, more a board wedged between the walls where the chamber narrowed, and an old wooden box as a stool in front of it. But even more shocking was that there were berries and edible roots on the table, and they were fresh. Someone had recently been in here, not a day ago, but within the last hour. Pete nodded at me to indicate not to speak. He took his Benchmade Saddle Mountain Skinner, which he always carried in hunting season, out of its sheath. Its 4 1/4 blade was razor sharp. He scanned the chamber with his maglite and came to a 2-foot wide by 3-foot opening of a crawl tunnel. With his flashlight in one hand and the hunting knife in the other, he got down on his hands and knees and crept into the hole. He hadn't gone very far, and his body lay flat on the tunnel floor, and his head with the helmet lamp looked back at me, and he screamed, "Pull me out!" I grabbed his boots and pulled until he was free of the narrow confines of the offshoot tunnel. He looked at me wide-eyed, and his voice echoed in the cavern. Run! I panicked and asked, "What is it?" Pete did not respond. He got to his feet, tugged at my jacket, and ran for the mine entrance. We scraped our helmets on the ceiling and bruised our arms against the timbers as we passed. Out in the daylight, Pete continued to run down the way we had come. I followed, not knowing what he had seen that frightened him. We did not speak, but ran through the forest until my home was in sight. Pete kept looking back, making sure nothing was following us, but what that was, I still had no idea. Inside, Pete bolted the door. We were both perspiring when we sat at the kitchen table. "What the hell was in there?" I asked again. "I don't really know," he gasped. "It was human, but nothing like us, more like a caveman, a Neanderthal. He had only animal skins over his shoulder, no clothes. He was eating a squirrel uncooked. When he looked at me, his eyes blazed with fury. He picked up a club, but couldn't raise it in the narrow confines of the room he was seated cross-legged in. You pulled me out in the nick of time." In a couple of days, Pete was back to normal from that horrifying encounter in the mine. He could have made that story up because he was a great storyteller, but you would have believed what he saw was real if you were there. I certainly do. There are people who live in the wilderness without contact with the modern world. There is no telling what they will do to you if you trespass into their home like we did. Growing up in the Midwest, there wasn't much to do in the summer. My gang of 8 classmates often spent time walking around our town, playing by the river and throwing stones. Like I said, there's not much to do around here. One evening at sunset, we were walking on an abandoned spur line that led to an old slaughterhouse. The place had been abandoned for decades. It was surrounded by a tall security fence with barbed wire at the top. None of us had ever been inside for this reason. But as we walked on this evening, we saw where a giant oak tree had blown over in a tornado that had struck our town a couple weeks back. It wasn't a disaster, but it took down some trees in town, and this oak fell over the fence, making a nice bridge into the slaughterhouse grounds. An open invitation to investigate. We thought the no trespassing sign was no longer important since the place was long abandoned. We wandered around, the last sunlight still bleeding through the mostly broken windows. Some rooms were pretty dark and spooky, with rusted meat hooks hanging from ceiling racks and chains on pulleys dragging on the floor. John picked up an old lard barrel and tossed it into a pit on the floor where meat scraps were shoveled when the place was working. That scared the piss out of us. Then we started to laugh, mostly out of nerves. But that is when something terrifying happened. A banging like a meat cleaver striking a slab of pork. It started slowly and built in intensity. I could hear even the bone being cut. We panicked. We were not alone in the abandoned slaughterhouse. Run. But it was hard to see in the twilight, and John tripped over a chain across the floor. The metal on the concrete reverberated as the sound of a prisoner in shackles. Fear gripped us all as we ran, making our way to the oak tree to cross the barbed wire fencing that imprisoned us. As we hit the ground on the far side, John shouted, "I dropped my cell phone when I tripped. Please come back with me. I can't leave it." Everyone said, "No, leave it. Let's get out of here." Only I reluctantly crossed back to the not-so-abandoned slaughterhouse. We crept silently, stepping over the broken glass that littered the floor, step by step, in near total darkness. We inched our way to the chain where John had tripped over. It was frighteningly still. John picked up his cell phone. Then, the sound came as clear as day. Whack, whack, whack. The sharp edge of a meat cleaver strikes bloody meat and hard bone. Simultaneously, we looked in the direction from which the sound resonated, and there, in a lamplight, was the most terrifying man. He was stripped to the waist and splattered with blood. His face was a knurled, twisted, and fierce expression of hate. He struck the carcass of who knows what, but it looked more human than animal, with violent blows. He wasn't butchering, he was destroying with rage. My eyes popped out of my skull when I met John's eyes just as wide in terror. We turned to run. A voice boomed, "Intruders, I'll get you. There's no way out." We knew the oak tree passage over the fence and scrambled across as fast as we could. We met up with our group and, in a solemn pact, agreed to tell no one what we witnessed. We didn't want whoever that demon was to find us, ever.
Subscribe.